What if I told you there was a camera that could shoot internal RAW in all frame rates and resolutions, up to 6K at 60 frames per second and 4K at 120 frames per second? No external recorder necessary. You'd probably think I was talking about a high-end cinema camera. What if I then told you that this camera can also take high-quality photos in a burst mode up to 120 JPEGs per second? On top of that, what if I told you that it featured in-body image stabilization and a fairly compact mirrorless body, all for around 2,000 USD? You'd think I was crazy, right? Well, you'd be wrong. Is the Nikon Z6 III the perfect hybrid photo-video camera? Oh, you bet your ass it is. What's up, guys? I am very excited to bring this video to you, a review of the Nikon Z6 III. This hybrid mirrorless powerhouse has been impressing me like crazy these past few months. I gotta say, guys, I have never come across such a well-balanced, versatile, do-it-all camera. And I'm just gonna say up front to y'all, if you can only afford one camera and you are a content creator or a hybrid shooter, you do mix of photo and video, and you wanna get really like the most out of both sides and not have to make really that many, if any, compromises, this camera is what you need to get. The first thing that I love about this camera, the thing that really sets it apart, is the internal RAW capabilities. This is running Nikon NRAW, and ever since Nikon bought Red and they went through that whole patent debacle, all the court cases, and Nikon ultimately won, and they purchased Red and they were able to implement NRAW into their Z series cameras, starting with the Z9 and the Z8, which are the big brothers of the Z6 III. Those cameras are all really awesome in their own right, but I do feel that the Z6 III just has the best balance of everything. It features a sleek and ergonomic design with a comfortable grip and a nice series of control dials, little flip out screen, which is important for content creation and filming oneself. And personally, this was the main reason that I went with it over the Z8 or the Z9, because those both have more limited screens that don't flip out and fully articulate. They do have better resolution. They both shoot in 8K, so if you need 8K, you are going to need to go for the Z8 or the Z9. But for me personally, I rarely shoot in 8K or need it. 6K is kind of the perfect, bread and butter sweet spot for me. So the Z6 III was perfect in that regard. It gives me all the resolution I need. And on top of all this, it's got enhanced autofocus, there's new intelligent features, and it's got this great partially stacked image sensor that I mentioned earlier. So this contributes to much better rolling shutter performance. The readout speeds on this camera and the rolling shutter are very controlled because of that partially stacked sensor. Now, there is a compromise in terms of dynamic range. You are going to see somewhat of a hit in the dynamic range compared to some of Nikon's other cameras like the Z8 and Z9. However, I think that for my purposes, the better rolling shutter performance, being able to move the camera around quickly, is more beneficial than, the minimal hit to dynamic range that the partially stacked sensor affords. And I think that it probably was cheaper. So, you can save a good $1,000 or so if you go with the Z6 III over the Z8 or the Z9. Now, this camera does have really good low light performance overall. It's not like a Sony A7S III or an FX3 or the Sigma FP. Like, this is not a sensor that can see in the dark, but it does have solid low light performance. And because you have the ability to shoot in RAW, you can control how much noise reduction is going to be applied in post. If you want noise reduction applied in camera, then you can use the compressed formats like H.264, H.265, or ProRes. However, I prefer to try to get as clean of an image as possible first. Then if there is some noise on the sensor, cleaning that up in post. NRAW is really flexible, and what is super unique about it is that you can lower the resolution to 4K and up to 60 frames per second still use the full sensor. So in most other cases, as far as I know, when it comes to using like Canon RAW, or even with the recent Panasonic Lumix cameras, like the S1R2, which has internal ProRes RAW, those are only going to be able to use either the full sensor, right? Or if you lower the resolution, you're cropping into the sensor. But in the case of the Z6 III, and actually I think the Z8 and the Z9 as well, as long as you are capping your frame rate at 60 frames per second, you can go down to 4K, but still use the full sensor readout. I think it must be some kind of like binning or downsampling of some kind, but I've never seen that before. I've only seen, cameras that, as I said, have to crop in when they are shooting at lower resolutions in RAW. Now, if you go up to 120 frames per second or 100 frames per second in 4K, that is going to incur a 1.5 times crop. I think just the camera doesn't have the processing capabilities to process the 4K 100 or 120 using the full sensor. But that's okay, that's a small compromise to make. So let me just illustrate that for you guys here. I've got the quick menu settings set up, and right now I'm shooting in the full sensor here, 6K at 24 frames per second. I can go up to 6K at 60 frames per second. It's still using the full sensor. And now even if I drop down to 4K at 60 frames per second, or even 4K at 24 frames per second there, it's still using the full sensor. And here at 4K, 120 frames per second, let me just boost the ISO here so you guys can see this a little bit better. Okay, and there we are. Now we are in the cropped 4K at 120 frames per second. Nikon calls this a DX crop. FX for full, DX for the Super 35 crop mode. I don't know where the D comes from. So not only do you have that ability to use the full sensor in 4K up to 60 frames per second, but with many other cameras that do shoot 4K at 120 frames per second, even cinema cameras like those from Canon, once you are shooting at that really high frame rate, it actually only allows you to shoot in a compressed format. You don't get 4K 120 in RAW on those other cameras. So I've seen, in terms of like Panasonic, Canon, Sony cameras, you have to go up to like the Burano or the Venice, or in the case of like the FX3 or the FX6, you have to use an external recorder to get 4K 120 RAW, but that is not the case with the Z6 III 4K 120 internal RAW. Whew, it is sweet, guys. I do want to touch on the photography features of this camera because it is a hybrid camera and the photo features are really solid. and are not to be overlooked. This is not just a camera you get only for video. So now we're going to take a look at some of the built-in picture profiles that Nikon offers. These are going to allow you to manipulate the color of the image in different ways. They're basically Nikon's equivalent to Fuji's film simulations. Now, while I do still think that Fuji has the best color science and nothing quite touches their film simulations, I do have to hand it to Nikon for doing a pretty formidable job. I would say that their picture profiles here are more robust than the ones that I've seen from Sony and Canon and Panasonic, but not quite up to the level of quality and just richness to the colors and the image that you can find in Fuji. Okay, so I have it set up here in the quick menu there to bring up these picture profiles, and there's a whole bunch of presets. The colors are, not too intense. This is not like some cheesy Instagram like color filters. But what's really great is that if you do feel that the colors are maybe a little bit too intense, but you like the general look of a picture profile, you can just select it and then press the down button. And that's going to bring up some different options for you. So we can actually change the intensity of the effect. Right now, this is the denim effect. So if I go to 0, versus pumping it up all the way to 100, right? It's like really saturated there. For the ones that I really like, my go-to picture profiles, I typically will lower the effect level to around 50%. You can adjust the sharpness and like mid-range sharpening, clarity, contrast, saturation. So it's got like decent control within the picture profiles. It's not going to give you as much control as Fuji allows. You can get, I would say, quite far just editing these within the camera. But then in addition to that, Nikon has this imaging software that's free to download, and you can actually adjust these properties further. There's like additional options within the software, and then you can save out those adjusted presets and upload them to your camera, and then you'll have like your own user presets. So that's basically getting as close to the level of customizability that Fuji offers when editing its film simulations. It's a little more cumbersome and a little more, steps involved than being able to just do it all in camera, like on a Fuji camera. So I haven't messed around with those yet. I've found that for my purposes, just having these, couple like 5 to 6 controls here just within the camera, and then any further adjustments I want to do, I'm just going to do those in Lightroom. So there's all these different release modes in terms of the speed at which you can take photos, continuous, like high quality, continuous high extended mode, and you can even shoot up to 120 images per second, like the 4K 120. You can shoot 120 JPEG images per second. It is in the Super 35 or DX crop mode, but that's pretty wild. So check this out, guys. That sound is just so satisfying. So the 120 frames per second burst mode there, it is only going to shoot in JPEG, so you're not going to get 120 raw images, but still, it's pretty impressive for wildlife, for sports. If you don't need to capture raw and you want to just get like the most out of burst shooting, that is going to be the mode that you're going to want to use. So on top of the great burst shooting modes, you've got a mechanical shutter as well as an electronic shutter, so you don't have to worry about flickering or strobe lights. And when it comes to autofocus, this camera has tons of great AI-powered features. So we've got single autofocus, continuous autofocus, and manual. But in addition to that, there is different area modes and subject detection. Like you've got people, animals, cars, planes, vehicles, all that good stuff. So many different modes. The autofocus box can be adjusted to your heart's content. So we've got wide area AF in large, small, dynamic area AF in small, medium, and large. Single point AF, that's just gonna be a small box. So you're just gonna tap and then half press the shutter to adjust the focus. But then if we go, say, into the dynamic area large mode, this one is much larger box, of course. So I'm just gonna tap and it's automatically gonna focus. And there we've got wide area. Try that one. That's gonna be like a really large box. But then we also have wide area C1, C2. You can customize the size of the box there. And then there's even 3D tracking and auto area AF, which is just going to automatically or dynamically switch between the different types of autofocus based on the subject or the situation that you're in. This is where the AI comes into play. But I think that it is pretty robust. Video mode is really solid. Let's go into 6K full frame here. So here I've got object tracking, and you can see that as I move the camera, the box stays really solidly locked on. Even as I zoom in and out, that box is really staying very locked on to its target. I'll zoom into the screen here, but yeah, it is really staying locked on quite good. And it's all quite intuitive. The user experience is quite nice. I have to say, before using this camera, I actually had not shot with Nikon cameras in a number of years. My previous Nikon camera was actually the D8500, I think, which was one of their DSLR cameras. So yeah, I have not shot with Nikon mirrorless cameras really at all until I picked up the Z6 III. And I gotta say, I was more than impressed. Really just all of the features that you need that you would find in the top of the line Sony, Canon, Panasonic cameras, right? With great autofocus. But on top of that, the internal RAW capabilities, the really well-controlled rolling shutter from the partially stacked sensor, good dynamic range, nice picture profiles. It's just such a well-rounded camera. All right, guys, now let's get out into the field and check out some of these features in action. This camera is working with in-body image stabilization. So that is going to be regardless of the lens. It's not going to be electronic. It's not going to be like a digital crop-in stabilization. It's happening within the body itself. And what's particularly awesome about that is that it works with all recording formats. So whether or not you're recording in H.264 or MOV or RAW, which is super awesome. So I think this is the first camera that I've worked with that has internal RAW and also in-body image stabilization. The other cameras that I've shot with that have internal RAW, they only have at most electronic stabilization. So what that means is it's going to crop into the sensor. It's going to be like a digital crop in order to stabilize the image. It's not real true stabilization like you'll get with in-body. Really a true luxury, I gotta say, guys, and not something I've experienced on any other camera. Now, you can mitigate some of those exposure issues by using ND filters, but right now I've got a screw-on ND filter and just filming handheld, right? So I need to have one hand on the wheel. I'm not really able to adjust the strength of this ND filter on the fly. Being able to work with that raw footage in that situation where, again, I don't have a ton of control over the lighting, the exposure. I'm kind of just flying solo here. Another great thing about this camera, guys, is that there are some good monitoring tools that Nikon has added. We've got waveforms, we've got histogram, zebras, and peaking for helping with focus. Now, the one exposure tool that I prefer using, the one that I love the most, is false color. We don't have false color yet, but I am really hoping that Nikon is going to add that in a future firmware update, because in my opinion, it's just the easiest way to expose. Now, for walking shots like this, selfie videos, vlog videos, you know, the stabilization is not going to be like gimbal level, okay? But because this camera can shoot in 6K, I can do a bit of a digital crop in post and still deliver in 4K and get a really nice stable image and still be able to shoot in RAW. And right now I want to show you guys some low light footage from the Z6 III. I'm shooting at 6400 ISO. The Z6 III, I don't know if it has a dual base ISO, but from the research I've done online, the base ISO is 800, but in low light situations, it can be pretty clean. The noise can be pretty clean up to 6400 ISO, or maybe even a little bit more. I think this low light footage honestly looks pretty good. The vast number of features that the camera offers and the very few compromises and the really robust internal RAW video at all resolutions and frame rates, like, you just can't go wrong. Oh, and what's super cool with the Nikon and Red partnership, Nikon has actually implemented NRAW LUTs that are based off of Red LUTs. And they're going to hopefully continue to add more of the LUTs that Red offers on, for example, the Komodo or V-Raptor cameras. So in terms of matching up footage shot on Red cameras and Nikon Z-mount cameras, you're gonna really be able to grade them together quite easily. And if you use the Red Control color grading software, you can also now load in NRAW files, not just Red RAW, but it now accepts NRAW, so you can do your color grading if you've gotten used to that workflow within Red's color grading software. It is just becoming so much easier to grade and match NRAW to Red RAW. So if you are, for example, shooting on the Komodo or the V-Raptor, you can consider picking up one of Nikon's mirrorless cameras as a B cam or a C cam, and you're not going to have any issues matching colors and grading both. All right, that is going to do it for this review of the Nikon Z6 III, my absolute favorite and just about perfect hybrid photo video mirrorless camera. This guy is coming with me on all my trips, and anytime that I need a small setup for my professional shoots, studio shoots, event shooting, it is really just going to be clutch in so many environment situations. I hope you enjoyed this video. This was a bit of a longer one. I wanted to do a bit more of a deep dive into all of my favorite features of this camera. So if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. Please subscribe to the channel and support me. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.